Canada woke up today to a crisis that nobody saw coming. A crisis that has rattled Ottawa, shocked Alberta, and thrown the entire country's energy future into uncertainty. For months, the federal government quietly believed the new pipeline deal with Alberta was settled, stable, and heading toward finalization. But then something happened, something sudden, something bold, and something so unexpected that even senior officials are reportedly scrambling for answers. The Assembly of First Nations has stepped forward with a demand so stunning that it threatens to flip the entire pipeline agreement upside down. Everything changed within hours. A quiet negotiation that had stretched for months suddenly burst into public conflict. And the moment that demand was issued, insiders say the political temperature across Ottawa spiked like a shockwave. Alberta's leadership called it an unacceptable complication. But Ottawa? Ottawa looked shaken. Because this wasn't a symbolic objection. This was a direct challenge, a power move from a group that holds enormous legal and moral weight in the country. A move that could stop the pipeline dead in its tracks. Behind the scenes, sources say the Prime Minister was briefed immediately. Senior advisors described the message as urgent, alarming, and potentially deal-breaking. While the public only saw the headline, inside government buildings, staff were already preparing contingency memos, alternative pathways, and political risk assessments. The reason? The demand is not a routine request. According to reports circulating within federal channels, First Nations leaders want full renegotiation of key sections of the pipeline agreement. Not amendments. Renegotiation. A complete reevaluation of how the deal was made, who it benefits, and how Indigenous communities will be involved going forward. And that's where things get dangerous for the government. Because reopening a major energy agreement, especially one already under public scrutiny, creates instability. Economic uncertainty. Political volatility. And for a country preparing for the 2026 election, volatility is the last thing Ottawa wants. Already, analysts warn that investors could view this as a sign of deeper conflict coming. Pipeline projects in Canada are infamous for being long, messy, and costly. One unexpected demand this early in the process can ripple across markets, provinces, and federal agendas. But what exactly triggered this sudden move? Multiple reports suggest that First Nations leaders felt excluded from the core decision-making process. They argue the pipeline was pushed forward without full consultation, without adequate protection guarantees, and without a clear framework for how their land and rights would be respected. In their words, they weren't at the table, they were informed after the fact. And for Indigenous communities with constitutional rights, that is not acceptable. But there's another layer, one that Ottawa quietly fears. The First Nations demand aligns with a growing national sentiment, that Canada's future cannot be built without Indigenous partnership, not anymore. And this puts pressure on the federal government to respond carefully. If they push back too strongly, they risk a political backlash. If they concede too quickly, they risk alienating Alberta and economic interests. The Prime Minister is caught between two powerful forces, each capable of shaping the national political map. Meanwhile in Alberta, reactions have been fiery. Provincial leaders are accusing Ottawa of losing control of the situation. They argue that delays harm workers, investment, and provincial autonomy. Alberta believes it delivered a fair agreement, one that balances growth and responsibility. And now they see this new demand as Ottawa's failure to maintain clarity. The tension is rising fast, even faster than Ottawa expected. But what makes this crisis even more explosive is the timing. Just as political analysts were praising Mark Carney for his steady energy policy vision, this crisis dropped like a bomb. Carney has long argued that Canada needs predictable, sustainable, and nationally coordinated energy planning. He's one of the few leaders warning that Canada cannot afford chaotic swings in energy policy. And now, right in the middle of national uncertainty, his message suddenly looks more accurate than ever. The question now is simple: who will steer this crisis with calm, strategy, and long-term vision? Inside political circles, whispers are already growing louder. Some say this moment could define the next election. Others say it's an opportunity for a leader to step forward and show they can navigate a storm without losing control. And that's why Carney's name is popping up again and again. To many, he represents the opposite of political panic. A steady hand. A planner. Someone who understands both economics and global energy trends. And while he hasn't commented publicly, insiders believe his team is already evaluating the situation, mapping out potential responses, and preparing a narrative that contrasts sharply with the current chaos. For the First Nations communities, this is more than politics. It's about land, rights, and history. For decades, they've watched governments push massive resource projects without fully respecting their voices. This time, they want guarantees before anything moves forward. Real guarantees. Not symbolic acknowledgements. And they aren't backing down. Their message is clear: there will be no pipeline unless their concerns are fully addressed. What happens next could reshape Canada's energy future. Ottawa might call for urgent negotiations, hoping to calm the storm. Alberta may attempt to pressure the federal government into fast-tracking the project. The First Nations leaders may expand their demands if they feel ignored. Or, and this is what many fear, the situation could escalate into legal battles, delays, and political polarization. Yet beneath the noise, one thing is becoming obvious: Canada is entering a new phase where Indigenous leadership cannot be sidelined. The country is changing. Expectations are changing. And the pipeline crisis is just the latest reminder. Today, as the government reviews the stunning demand, as Alberta fumes, and as First Nations prepare for the next steps, Canada stands at a crossroads. A path of conflict, delay, and division, or a path